Hey, stop scrolling for a second. I need you to hear this. There was a woman, a mother, who hadn't spoken a single word in 11 months. Not one. No crying. No screaming. No prayers. Just silence. Like someone had reached inside her chest and pulled out the part of her that made her human. Her son was one of the most powerful billionaires in the country. He had money to fix everything. Everything except this. Doctors couldn't explain it. Therapists gave up. Even her own son, with all his wealth, stood helpless at her bedroom door every single night, watching her stare at a photograph. And then, a 3-year-old little girl, the daughter of the maid who cleaned their floors, walked up to this broken woman and handed her something. What happened next? I still can't talk about without tearing up. Stay with me. You need to hear this one. Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive in, I just want to ask, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country down in the comments. I genuinely love seeing where you all are from. It reminds me that no matter where we are in the world, we all feel the same things. Love, loss, pain, and hope. If you're new here, welcome home. This channel is a safe place for stories that make you feel something real. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. If that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing. No pressure, but trust me, you're going to want to be here for what's coming. Now, let's get into this story. Because this one is different. This one stayed with me for weeks. Some houses are built with bricks and mortar. But some are held together by a person. And when that person is gone, the whole house forgets how to breathe. His name was Rayyan Malik. 35 years old. Forbes listed. The kind of man whose name appeared in headlines and boardrooms, whose phone never stopped ringing, whose calendar was booked 3 months in advance. From the outside, Rayyan had everything a person could possibly want. 3 luxury properties, a private jet, a company worth billions, and a reputation that commanded silence when he walked into a room. But if you looked closely, and most people never did, you would notice something. A heaviness behind his eyes. A stillness in his jaw when someone laughed too loudly around him. A habit he had of checking his phone not for messages, but for a photograph. The same photograph. Every time. It was a picture of 2 women and a man. His mother, his sister, and himself. They were standing in front of a small, almost embarrassingly modest house. The house where they had grown up before the money came. His mother, Zara Begum, had her arms wrapped around both of her children. Her face was mid-laugh. His sister, Alia, was making a ridiculous face at the camera. The kind only a 29-year-old who never took herself too seriously would make. And Rayyan, young, thinner, not yet carrying the weight of the world, was smiling in a way that he hadn't smiled since. That photograph was taken 14 months ago. Alia died 11 months ago. Car accident. A rainy Tuesday evening. A truck that ran a red light. And just like that, the girl who made ridiculous faces in photographs, who called her mother 3 times a day, who sent her brother voice notes just to say, "I miss you, idiot," was gone. Rayyan had handled it the way he handled everything, by working, by moving, by making sure that the silence never caught up with him. Grief for Rayyan was something that existed somewhere behind him, always chasing, never quite reaching. But his mother, Zara, 59 years old, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who pressed flowers between the pages of books and remembered everyone's birthdays, Zara simply stopped. Not just stopped talking. She stopped existing in the way that living people exist. She sat in Alia's old bedroom, in a cream-colored chair by the window, from morning until the light faded. She didn't eat unless someone placed food directly in her hands. She didn't respond when spoken to. She looked at you, through you, like you were made of glass and she was searching for something on the other side. The family doctor called it complicated grief disorder, a trauma response so deep that the mind essentially barricaded itself. Rayyan hired the best psychiatrists in the city. He flew in a grief counselor from London. He sat beside his mother every evening and talked, told her about his day, read her the news, once even read her an entire chapter from her favorite Urdu novel. His voice cracking on the last page. Nothing. 11 months of nothing. And so the house, this massive, gorgeous, painfully quiet house, learned to operate around a wound. The staff spoke in hushed tones. Music was never played. Guests were rarely invited. Even the birds that used to gather in the garden seemed to have flown somewhere else. Except for one person. One small, loud, wonderfully chaotic exception to all the silence. Her name was Maryam. She was 3 years old. And she was the daughter of Nadia, the young woman who had been working as a housekeeper in Rayyan's home for the past 8 months. Maryam had no concept of grief. She had no understanding of the rules of this house. She didn't know why everyone whispered or why the lady by the window never smiled. All she knew was that she liked the way the sunlight hit that room in the afternoon. And so, every day, without anyone asking, without anyone knowing, she kept going back. Have you ever watched a child walk into pain without fear? There's something almost holy about it, isn't there? They say grief is just love with nowhere to go. But what happens when even the love starts to go quiet? In a house full of adults, silence was the norm. In a 3-year-old, silence was a warning. Nadia found her at the end of the hallway, standing in the doorway of Zara's room, just looking in. Zara was in her chair. The window light fell across her face in long golden strips. She was holding the photograph, always the photograph, and her eyes were distant, somewhere past the glass, past the garden, past all of it. Maryam hadn't gone in. She was just standing at the threshold, her small hands gripping the doorframe. Her head tilted the way children tilt it when they're trying to understand something too large for them. Nadia's heart seized. "Maryam, come here." But before she could reach her, Maryam turned and looked at her mother with those big, serious eyes, and said the simplest, most heartbreaking thing. "Mama, that auntie is sad." Nadia scooped her up quickly, apologized under her breath toward the room even though Zara showed no sign of having noticed, and carried Maryam back to their quarters. That night, she held her daughter a little longer before sleep. But Maryam wasn't finished. The next afternoon she escaped again. And the afternoon after that. Every time, Nadia found her at that same doorway, watching, quiet in a way she almost never was anywhere else. It was as if something in that room called to her. Something only children can hear. And on the 4th day, before Nadia could stop her, Maryam walked inside. Zara didn't move. Maryam walked straight up to the chair, looked up at the tall, still woman with the faraway eyes, and said, in her loud, confident 3-year-old voice, "Why are you so sad?" The room held its breath. And Zara, for the first time in 11 months, blinked. What would you have done if you were Nadia in that moment? Would you have pulled your child away? Or let something unfold that you didn't fully understand? Sometimes healing doesn't arrive on horseback. It arrives in tiny feet, without an appointment, without warning, and it sits down on your floor and starts talking. Nadia froze in the doorway. Her mind was running through every possible consequence. Losing her job, disturbing the madam, the look on Rayyan Malik's face if he found out that her daughter had walked into his grieving mother's private room and asked her why she was sad. But something kept her feet still. Some instinct deeper than fear. Maryam, unbothered by the silence that had followed her question, did what all 3-year-olds do when they don't receive an answer. She moved on. She looked around the room with open curiosity, walked to the edge of the bed, and then sat herself down on the carpet near Zara's feet as if she'd been invited there 100 times. "I like your chair," she announced. Zara's eyes dropped, slowly like a curtain lowering, from somewhere far away down to the small child now sitting at her feet. She didn't speak, but she looked. And this, Nadia would later tell Rayanne with tears streaming down her face, was the first real look Zara had given anything in 11 months. Not the glass-eyed stare. Not the hollow gaze at the photograph. But an actual look, the kind where a person is present. Miriam, now noticing she had an audience, launched into a full and detailed monologue about a butterfly she had seen in the garden that morning, how it was orange with black things on it, how she had tried to catch it but her mama said no, and how she thought butterflies probably didn't like to be caught but they didn't say so because they were butterflies and butterflies couldn't talk but maybe they could and we just didn't know. Nadia, terrified, transfixed, watched from the doorway as something extraordinary and terrifying happened. The corner of Zara's mouth moved. Just slightly. Just barely. A tremor of something that had been buried under 11 months of silence. It wasn't a smile. Not yet. But it was the memory of one. Nadia quietly left and came back 30 minutes later to collect Miriam, her hands shaking. And the next day, she didn't stop her daughter from going. She simply followed quietly, stayed in the doorway and watched. This became the pattern. Every afternoon Miriam visited. She brought things. A crayon drawing of the garden. A smooth stone she'd found near the fountain. A picture book she asked Nadia to carry because it was too heavy for her arms, though it weighed almost nothing. She never demanded Zara respond. She never seemed to notice or care that she didn't. She simply filled the room with her presence the way sunlight fills a room, not asking permission, not checking whether it's welcome, just arriving and being. On the 9th day, Miriam climbed into the chair. Not beside Zara. Into the chair itself. Beside her. There was just enough room. Miriam pressed her small body against Zara's arm, looked up at her, and then looked at the photograph Zara was holding. "Who's that?" she asked. A long silence. "That lady is pretty." Another silence. And then, Rayanne heard it from the hallway, where he had been standing in disbelief for the past 10 minutes, having been quietly told by Nadia what had been happening. A sound. A sound that stopped him cold. His mother's voice. Cracked, thin, barely more than a whisper, like something dragged up from the bottom of a dry well. 2 words. "My daughter." Rayanne Malik, billionaire, boardroom general, a man who had negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions without flinching, slid down the hallway wall and sat on the floor, put his face in his hands, and wept without making a single sound. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being that son, having tried everything, spent everything, given everything, and then watching a 3-year-old child do in 9 days what you couldn't do in 11 months? He could rebuild cities. He could not rebuild his mother, until he understood that some things are not built. They are grown slowly in the soil of small, quiet moments. Rayanne didn't tell his mother he had heard her. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because something told him that the moment was too fragile. That naming it, labeling it, making it a milestone would shatter it like glass. So he wiped his face, straightened his jacket, and went back to his office on the upper floor. And he sat very still for a long time. That night, he called Nadia into the formal sitting room. She came in with her hands clasped in front of her, standing straight but with the careful stillness of someone who has learned how to take up as little space as possible. She was prepared, Rayanne could see, to be reprimanded, possibly dismissed. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "How long has Miriam been going to see my mother?" Nadia's chin lifted slightly. 9 days, sir. I tried to stop her at first. I am sorry if... Don't apologize, he said quietly. He stopped. She spoke today, he said. My mother. She said 2 words. His voice didn't break, but it came close. I haven't heard her voice in 11 months. Nadia's hand went to her mouth. Your daughter, Rayan continued, has done something that every specialist, every therapist, every resource I have could not do. He paused. I don't know what to say to you. You don't have to say anything, sir, Nadia said, and her own eyes were bright. Maryam she doesn't know any better. She sees someone sad and she just goes to them. She's always been like that. She doesn't know any better, Rayan repeated softly, almost to himself, like he was writing it somewhere. From that night, things in the house shifted. Rayan stopped pretending to his mother that everything was fine. He started sitting beside her in the evenings the way Maryam did. Not talking about grief, not trying to fix anything. Just being there. Present. Like a person who had come not to solve but simply to stay. And Maryam kept coming. Zara began to wait for her. The staff noticed it first, that the madam's eyes would drift toward the doorway around the same time each afternoon. That her hands, usually so still in her lap, would rest differently, more open, like someone leaving a door slightly ajar. Maryam started calling her sad auntie first, then just auntie. Then, one afternoon that Nadia will never forget as long as she lives, Maryam climbed into the chair, cupped Zara's face in her tiny hands, looked at her with total seriousness and said, You should smile. You have a nice face. And Zara smiled. Not a small, trembling, almost smile. Real one. Slow, rusty, like a door opened after years of disuse, but real. The kind that reached the corners of her eyes. The kind that Rayan, standing in the hallway again because he couldn't stay away, recognized from the photograph. He had to leave the hallway very quickly after that. But there was something else happening. Something that no one in the house had noticed yet. Something underneath the warmth, quietly gathering. Complication. A truth that was about to surface. Because Nadia, for all her care and professionalism, was hiding something. Not out of dishonesty. Out of fear. Have you ever held a secret not because you were cruel, but because you were terrified of what the truth might cost you? The heaviest secrets are not the ones built from lies. They are the ones built from love, and the terror of losing what that love has built. Nadia had a letter. It had been given to her 8 months ago, on her first day of work, by the estate's previous housekeeper, an older woman named Farida who had served the Malik family for 6 years before her retirement. Farida had pressed it into Nadia's hands at the gate, looked at her with a strange, serious expression and said, If something opens, you'll know when. Nadia hadn't known what that meant. She had put the letter in the bottom of her bag, under Maryam's spare clothes, and largely forgotten about it. Until the night Zara smiled. That night, unable to sleep, she had gone to her bag to pull out Maryam's extra sweater, and the letter had fallen out onto the floor. She'd sat on the edge of her bed, looked at it for a long time, and then, with hands that weren't quite steady, opened it. It was from Alia, Vin's sister. The one who had died. The one in the photograph. Nadia knew this not because she had known Alia personally, but because the letter was signed with her name, and because Farida had written a small note on the envelope explaining who had given it to her and asking her to pass it to Zara when the time felt right. Alia had written the letter 6 months before her death, not because she knew she would die, but because she had been diagnosed with a minor heart irregularity, had faced a few weeks of scared, quiet reflection and had, in the way deeply loving people sometimes do, written down things she hadn't yet said out loud. The letter was written to her mother. Nadia read only the first 2 lines before folding it shut, because it wasn't hers to read. But those 2 lines stayed with her all night. Mama, if you're reading this, please don't stop living. I need you to promise me. Because your living is how I stay alive in this world. She lay awake for hours. She was a housekeeper, a single mother, someone who had been told, in 100 subtle and unsubtle ways throughout her life, to know her place, to not overstep, keep her head down. Who was she to decide when the time felt right? Yet, she thought of Miriam's hands on Zara's face. You should smile. You have a nice face. She thought of Zara's eyes moving from their long empty gaze to something awake and present. She thought of Rayyan sliding down the wall in the hallway. And she thought, what if this is the moment? What if this is exactly what Farida meant? She went to Rayyan the next morning. She told him about the letter. She placed it on the table between them, still folded, still sealed, and said, I don't know if this is my decision to make, so I'm making it yours. Rayyan looked at the letter for a long time. His jaw worked. His hands were flat on the table. Then he picked it up, stood, and said quietly, Thank you, Nadia. He went to his mother's room. He sat down beside her. Miriam was there as usual, perched in the chair, busy explaining something about frogs to Zara, who was listening with a new, soft expression she had begun wearing like something rediscovered from a drawer. Rayyan waited until Miriam ran to Nadia for a snack. And then he held out the letter. Mama, he said, this is from Alia. The room went very still. Zara's eyes moved to the envelope, to Alia's handwriting on the front, because of course it was Alia's handwriting, loopy and certain and unmistakable. Her hand rose, shook. She took it. And Rayyan did the hardest thing he had ever done. Harder than anything in any boardroom. Harder than any decision that had ever cost him money or power or sleep. He stood up, walked to the window, and waited, his back to his mother, while she opened the letter from the daughter she had lost and read the words she had not known were waiting for her. He heard the moment she reached whatever Alia had written, because the silence in the room changed. And then, for the first time since Alia died, Zara wept. Not the dry, locked grief she had been carrying. Real tears. Heaving, breaking, gasping tears. The kind that means something is being released rather than contained. Rayyan turned around, went to his mother, and held her. And this time she held him back. They stayed that way for a long time. And neither of them would ever tell anyone exactly what Alia had written. That letter was theirs. But something it said had cracked something open. Something that even Miriam's small miraculous presence had only begun to loosen. But the story wasn't over. Because what happened on Mother's Day 6 weeks later, that was the thing that changed everything again. For all of them. In a way none of them had prepared for. Do you believe some things are meant to find us at exactly the right time? That some letters, some people, some small moments are placed in our path not by accident? And then came the day that none of them planned for. The day a 3-year-old girl reached into her pocket and gave a grieving mother the most powerful thing in the world. Not money, not medicine, not time. Just love, hand-drawn in crayon. It was Mother's Day. The house smelled like cardamom tea, the way it had before everything. Someone on the staff had quietly, bravely, put fresh flowers in the front hall. Small white ones. Nobody acknowledged them, but nobody removed them either. Rayyan had bought his mother flowers. Beautiful ones. He'd left them by her door with a handwritten note he'd spent 2 evenings writing and 3 times thrown away. He was, for all his capabilities, still learning how to say things that didn't involve numbers or strategies or fixes. Nadia had not planned anything for the day. She was in the kitchen and Miriam was somewhere, as Miriam always was, somewhere she probably shouldn't be. What Nadia didn't know was that 2 days earlier, Miriam had been in the kitchen when one of the older staff members, a woman named Hajra, had explained to her young granddaughter what Mother's Day was. she'd said. "It's a day we give something to the mothers who love us to say thank you." Miriam had listened with enormous seriousness. And then she had gone and found a piece of paper. And her crayons. And she had made something. But here is the thing about Miriam. Here is the thing that would shatter and then reassemble every heart in that house. She had made 2 cards. One for her mother. One for Zara. Not because anyone told her to. Not because she fully understood what she was doing. But because in Miriam's 3-year-old heart, with its perfect, uncomplicated logic, Zara was someone who needed a card. Zara was someone who was sad. And you gave things to people who were sad. She had drawn on the first card, for Nadia, a picture of the 2 of them, round-headed and smiling, holding hands. She had written Mama in large, assisted block letters, with a heart. On the second card, for Zara, she had drawn 3 figures. Not 2. 3. A big one and a medium one and a tiny one. And at the top in those same large letters she had written, with Hajra's quiet, wondering help, "Happy Mother's Day." She walked to Zara's room alone. She knocked on the door. She had learned to knock. Zara had taught her gently, during one of their afternoons. "Knock first, Habibi, then come in." Zara's voice came from inside, real, present, awake. "Come in." Miriam pushed the door open. Zara was in her chair. But the chair had moved. It was no longer facing the window in that locked, distant way. It had been turned slightly toward the room, toward the door, toward the world in small degrees. Miriam walked across the room. She stopped in front of Zara. She held out the card with both hands, the way children offer things with their whole bodies with total commitment, and said, "Happy Mother's Day, Auntie." Zara looked at the card. She took it carefully the way you take something precious. She opened it. Inside, in Miriam's crayon hand, were the 3 figures. And underneath them, in Hajra's writing because Miriam had dictated it and couldn't write it herself, "You are my auntie, but I think you are also a mama because you love a lot. Love you." From Miriam. And beneath that, in Miriam's own hand, enormous and crooked and absolutely certain, a single red heart. Zara's face did something then that no one who witnessed it would ever be able to fully describe. Opened. Not broke. Not shattered. Open. Like a window that had been painted shut for too long, finally freed. Because here is what no one in that house knew. Here is the twist that Rayyan himself did not discover until that afternoon, when his mother called him into her room for the first time, herself, without prompting, without waiting. The 3rd figure in Miriam's drawing. The medium one between the big Zara and the tiny Miriam. Rayyan had assumed it was him. But when he asked Miriam, gently, curiously, who the 3 people were, Miriam looked at him with those enormous dark eyes and said, completely simply, "That's Auntie. That's me. And that's the pretty lady from the photo, Alia." Miriam had drawn Alia. She had seen the photograph 100 times during her afternoon visits. She had asked about the pretty lady in it. She had, in her 3-year-old heart, included her, because to Miriam, someone who was loved and remembered and spoken about with such tender sadness was not gone. They were just someone she hadn't met yet. Rayyan had to leave the room. He walked to the garden where the orange butterfly with the black things on its wings apparently lived, and he stood in the afternoon light and he allowed himself to feel something he had been outrunning for 11 months. Not just grief, but gratitude. Overwhelming, disorienting, almost violent gratitude. For a 3-year-old who didn't know the rules. For a mother who had handed her daughter the freedom to be unapologetically, invasively, magnificently alive. For a child who looked at a broken woman and saw not damage but a person who deserved to be included in a drawing. And for his sister. His ridiculous, phone call sending, voice note leaving, face making sister, who had known even before she left that love needed to be written down. That evening, Zara came to the dinner table. For the first time in 11 months, she sat with her son and ate a meal. And across the table on her left sat Nadia. And in the chair beside Nadia, barely reaching the table, kicking her feet rhythmically against the chair legs, was Miriam, who ate 3 bites of rice and then announced that she was full and could she have something sweet. And Zara laughed. A real, full, chest-deep laugh. And in that laugh was everything. Alia's voice and Rayanne's relief, and Nadia's exhaled prayer, and the sound of a house remembering after 11 months how to breathe. The lesson. Grief can make us believe that the world has ended. That joy is a betrayal. That silence is the only honest response to an unbearable loss. But here is what a 3-year-old girl taught a billionaire's broken family on an ordinary afternoon in an extraordinary house. Love does not require permission to enter. It does not check whether it is qualified. It does not wait until the time is right or the words are perfect. It simply arrives, with a crayon drawing in both hands outstretched, and it says, "I see you. I'm including you. You are not invisible to me." Alia was right in her letter. A mother living is how a child stays alive in the world. And sometimes, it takes another child, small and fearless and gloriously unaware of the rules, to remind a mother that she is still needed. That the love she carries doesn't die, just needs somewhere to go. And here is the question I want you to sit with tonight. Is there someone in your life right now? Someone sitting by a window, someone quiet in a way that worries you, who is waiting not for a solution but just for someone to knock on their door and hand them a drawing? Who can you be someone's Miriam for? If this story touched something in you, and I believe it did, please give it a like. Takes 1 second and it means the world. Drop in the comments. What part of this story hit you the hardest? I read every single one. If you're not subscribed yet, this is your sign. Stories like this one every week. Stories that make you feel human again. And if you want more, the next story is already waiting for you. Don't let it sit there alone. Take care of each other. And never underestimate the power of a knock on someone's door.